Welcome in, Believe in Commanders podcast, part of the Believe Network. Scott Jackson, a former Redskin wide receiver, Anthony Armstrong with you here. Please comment, like, follow below here. We'd appreciate that. And we are brought to you by FanDuel. And hallelujah, Anthony. The staff is pretty much complete, right? As the Commanders have found their defensive coordinator. Daronte Jones comes in, Morgan State product, been with the Vikings the last few years with one of the best defenses in the NFL under Brian Flores. And Dan Quinn going with another first-time coordinator, as we've been talking about leading up to this thing. It feels gutsy, right, for the head coach to go with two youngins here.
But you know what, though? If anybody was going to do it, Dan Quinn's the type of guy. You know, he's been the guy that's the mantra, do tough S word with good people. And he went out there to do that. He put out a mantra, a ploy, not a ploy, but a plea to say, hey, we have to evolve. We have to be willing to do something different. And going with two young folks, unproven, if you will, is definitely risky. It's definitely risky. I mean, the David Blau side of things, he would know how this guy works. So it's a trusted hire. So maybe he's ahead of the curve on that one. And we were just talking off air with Daronte Jones, just like Brian Flores was like, I can't take the gig, but I know a guy. You know, I can't take a lateral. Yeah, he's like, I can't take a lateral hire. I'll take a head coaching spot, but I know a guy. And with the recent trend of passing game coordinators / DB coaches getting hired as defensive coordinators, I like this. That means he's on the right trend. If Washington would have went and gotten a 65-year-old, ornery, angry defensive line coach, and no disrespect to any of y'all out here that may be listening, but that would have been a step into the past, right? That would have been a step back. This is the way the league is going. You have to have somebody who understands to coach up the DBs. And frankly, from a secondary that has been garbage, this is a good hire.
Yeah. So again, born in suburban Washington, D.C., played college ball, Morgan State. He's been all over coaching levels, right? He's coached in college, coached in the NFL here, been under some really good defensive players or defensive coordinators in his time. Besides just Brian Flores, you're talking about a guy who coached under Mike Zimmer, Vance Joseph, Marvin Lewis. So he's had a lot of experience with different people. And I'll say this is what I like about it. Again, I'm here to say I have no idea if Daronte Jones, David Blau are going to be any good at their jobs, but I do know, Dan Quinn here, he's out of his coaching tree, right? Like that's what I find interesting too. And, it would have been very easy. I think a lot of people probably thought Al Harris made a lot of sense, or some of the guys he had worked with in the past. But, here he goes kind of got of his tree a little bit, and maybe out of, that's somebody he has a past relationship with. So I find that part of it interesting and potentially, very good in this thing. But, I want to point out this, Anthony, a lot of us have come to this conclusion after Cliff Kingsbury was fired, right? And Joe Witt was let go, that, hey, there must be this internal clock that is speeded up in the organization, right? Where Dan Quinn better nail these hires, and have to have immediate success next season or else, right? Yeah. But what if it's the other way, right? Like, what if it's like, hey, we're going to bring in two guys who have not done this before. So we're going to develop this thing. We're going to have some patience. I know nobody wants to hear that. But what if it's the other way, when in reality, there isn't this internal, oh my God, what did you just do 4-13? And realization that, like, yeah, man, we got a lot of work to do. The roster's not right yet. Maybe that's why they weren't attractive to some of these more well-known coordinators, right? So we're going to have to work on it, and we're all going to have to work together and be collaborative and support each other. And maybe that's what it is, more so than, oh my God, you better win 13 games next year, 12 games or else.
Yeah, I feel like the organization moves differently. It operates differently. There's, like you said, a lot of collaboration between the GM and the scouting and the coaches, and everybody's working together to move this gargantuan ship. I was just learned about the Knock Nevis. Have you ever heard of that thing? The Knock Nevis? It's the world's largest man-made ship. That sucker was like 4 football fields long, Scott. Took 2 miles to turn type stuff, 5 miles to stop. Ridiculously large. That's kind of how an organization is. Whenever you're trying to get the right players in there, you're trying to get the right coaching staff in there, and they're making these hires that are trying to address specific flaws. I think that makes a lot of sense, right? You have a secondary and a defense that hasn't created turnovers. What has this fella been a part of? Daronte Jones has been a part of this Vikings defense who this is per David Harrison too. I got to give a hat tip. Sure. He says that last season they led the league in forced fumbles and fumble recoveries. Yep. The previous season, they led the league in interceptions. Sure as hell could use some of that over here in Washington. And we've been saying it all off season that we want to have somebody that's going to address those needs. Dan Quinn said it in his exit conference. They don't say much. That's the thing. They don't say much. But when they do say certain things, you put a big Sharpie circle around it, underline it, and highlight it, because that's what they went off and addressed. So now it's going to be exciting to see how Adam Peters finds the players in the draft and in free agency who's going to actually fit the bill. And I was looking, there's one guy who fits a position of need, and he would fit the 1-year prove-it contract. Is the young fella Jeff Okudah. First-round draft pick to the Lions out of Ohio State. And he's really been all over the league. He's only 26, almost 27 years old. And he plays cornerback. So, he already knows Daronte Jones. And I'm telling you, his stats aren't really they're not jumping off. I think he has 2 interceptions in his whole career. But hey, you're looking for prove-it guys and somebody who's actually been familiar with this coach. It may make sense. He's going to be an undrafted free agent. So why not throw his name in the hat, Scott?
We're here, Believe in Commanders podcast, part of the Believe Network. We're brought to you by FanDuel. And, of course, with the Super Bowl teams, everybody's always looking for a copycat thing, right? Yeah. When you look at the Super Bowl teams, and it wasn't like, when you look at the Seattle side and the New England side, these were not two teams that were shy in free agency. And, we've kind of led to believe, because maybe of our Redskins teams of the past here and Jacksonville and some of the other teams that have swung big and spent big and missed big, that I don't know, man, you got to be really careful in free agency. You don't want to do anything too stupid here. But these teams, they nailed it. The Patriots and Harden Milton Williams from the Eagles worked out really well. He's been a really good player for them. Obviously, Stephon Diggs has been a big piece of what they've done this year. Coming off knee surgery, they took a chance on a vet who, let's be honest, kind of needed to prove it to a lot of people. And then you look at Seattle, and look, Sam Darnold's no better example of that, right? They're like, okay, everybody else is telling us this guy's damaged, this guy's no good. We can work with him, and now look where they are. But all these teams, just because it didn't work, it's other places, and this has kind of been don't do this, don't do that kind of stuff. They kind of went into it, they leaned into it, and they weren't afraid of it, and it's worked out really well for them as they put this thing together. Look, Seattle was really close a year ago. I don't want people to forget they just missed the playoffs. They were a double-digit win team, whereas New England obviously was a 4-win team. And New England's got a little bit of what the Commanders had going for them last year. A little bit of that, hey, man, we caught some breaks in the way mojo. You had the lesser schedule. But when you got in the playoffs, you beat teams that, are higher quality. So, that can certainly win the Super Bowl. I mean, there's no question about it. It's a really good team. So I'll be interested to see how the Commanders and what they've learned from year one's, year two, I should say, offseason to go into this year, and how much more aggressive they may or may not be.
Yeah, I think the key thing about those free agency hires and the way that at least teams seem to be moving now has to do with the fact that they are making the hires based on the specific need of the system and what the player can do. And I think the communication is a whole lot more clear. In the past, it used to be, especially specifically in Washington, it'd be like, who is the biggest name? Like Mel Kiper says, this is the top free agent in free agency. He's going to get this much. Okay, let's go get that guy. And you used to think stockpiling names and paying the people. It's not the Yankees. This isn't the Dodgers. Sure. It's not baseball. You have to have team dynamics. Things have to make sense. So people are hiring strategically. People are hiring strategically. And I do think it's good when you have it all aligned. And I think when the coaches know what they're looking for, and then the scouts know what the coaches are looking for, and they all have an agreement about what type of, intangibles and those type of, characteristics that they're looking for from their teammates and from the players, it makes it a lot easier. It makes it a lot easier. So it felt good to be able to go into the off season and kind of trust the thing that they're doing. You don't have to be like, oh Lord, they went and overpaid for this guy, and now we kind of got to talk him up. You know what I mean? But now it's like, hey, they made this deal, and frankly, they're probably going to be more underwhelming deals, right? But they make sense in the grand scheme of things, right? So that's how AP wants to move. You know, he's going to make strategic pays. He doesn't want to pay people that he doesn't know. He said that in the press conference.
He said that very clearly. Yep.
Very clearly. He's like, we made that mistake before. I don't think he's going to be making big swings at people that he doesn't have any affiliation with. And frankly, going outside of the coaching circles helps you have a little bit more access to some other players.
Yeah, I do like that. Again, Blau clearly seems like a rocket ship kind of guy. Daronte Jones was not maybe somebody that everybody had on their list in the early going. And then later when we saw they were going to these passing coordinator guys, and you'd see some of that stuff coming up. So that part of it's interesting. And again, he wasn't somebody that was an obvious Dan Quinn fit or Adam Peters fit either. And so I think that's pretty cool. And look, Brian Flores and that defense, they made this team's afternoon a living hell in that game. I mean, they were physical. After that first drive where they got down to, the 1 yard line and stalled out on the 4 downs, they were so physical. And of course, that was the game where Zach Ertz, ended his season, which was terrible. But man, I just was left that game being like, wow, the Vikings, if they had any kind of offense, look out, right? Like if they just had any type of offense, and which I'm sure is why Viking fans are kicking themselves in the butt this offseason right now, thinking about, I just stuck with Sam Darnold for another year or two, because that's what Seattle basically bet on. They're like, look, we have this great defense. Man. We can run the ball. We got good pieces here. We don't need this guy to be a hero every week. He doesn't have to be the league's MVP. But, man, he showed you last week in the championship game when he needs to. He stepped up in some big ways, and it wasn't the old, narrative, oh, Sam Darnold, he gags and sees ghosts and all this other stuff. He saw wide open receivers, and he got him the football. And he made a play with his legs at one point. I mean, it was really cool to see him just kind of play free.
It's beautiful when all parts of like an offense are starting to align, right? Like I feel like there's different players where like an Aaron Rodgers is like, give me the keys, give me my own set of tools. I'm going to go get my own parts. I don't want to go get yours. I know where I can get them better and cheaper. And like, that's how Aaron Rodgers runs his offense. But the way the Seattle Seahawks are operating with Sam Darnold, it's just kind of like, hey, it's a full collaborative effort. Yeah. I mean, the OC is putting some creative things in line. It's very helpful to have an awesome receiver like JSN, but the creativity and the openness to put him and line him up in the backfield and let him run routes from there and not having shame to do that. That's huge. That is fluidity. That is definitely anti-rigid, right? You're not being stuck in your ways. And I can tell you this much. It is frustrating to sit there and be on an offense when you look on highlights and you're like, dang, they doing that. He's just running around wide open. You know what I mean? They're not asking Sam Darnold to do anything uber spectacular, but he does drop some dimes. He throws some hellified passes, and then JSN makes it even look that much sweeter, right? Like the trust factor is there. He's just like, I can throw it in this spot, and it's safe that nobody's going to catch it except for him. And then here comes JSN to turn it into a touchdown. It's a beautiful connection. It really is. But the one thing I thought that I was mentioning about the pass game coordinators is, and having David Blau is Dan Quinn is staying ahead of the curve, right? Think about it. If David Blau is going to have this super mind and is thinking proactively and is creating offensive plays rather than reusing what everybody else is doing, then that means that Daronte is going to have to create some stuff to stop those things. And they're going to be on the front edge and the leaning side of where the league is going. Here's the cool thing I thought about with, who was it with? Daronte, who he's gone against. Think of the minds and offenses that he's coached against. Matt LaFleur in the Shanahan tree. Ben Johnson in Detroit and Ben Johnson in Chicago. Yep. So those are the teams that you're going to have to go through. He's got the recipe to battle them. It's good to have him on this side now.
Yeah, I was looking at so this year, the Minnesota Vikings defensively were holding teams to like 158 yards net passing per game. I mean, think about that. I mean, and we talk about the secondary as much as they're getting torched. They were just stingy back there. And it wasn't like they led the league in interceptions like the Chicago was living off the turnover, right? They weren't necessarily living off the turnover either, which is good because let's be honest, sometimes the turnover is a luck thing, right? Like sometimes you just have those years the ball bounces your way, sometimes you don't. I feel like we just lived that with the Commanders. But anyway, it was good to see, third down percentages teams were only like 34% against them. I mean, there's just a lot of good things. And again, he doesn't get to take the Viking defense here. I get it. He doesn't get to take Brian Flores with him. This is going to be his thing. Maybe he's got some, different approaches than Brian Flores, but he's been around some good people. He's coming from a successful situation, despite their offense. I think it's a bold hire by Dan Quinn. It's out of his, I would say out of his comfort zone. And I'm fascinated to hear what they have to say, what kind of tipped it towards Daronte Jones. And look, as we talked about, there's guys that had options that probably looked at his team and were like, I don't know. There's not an obvious pass rush star. There's no Michael Parsons in this defense anymore, right? Yeah. There's no Pro Bowler in the secondary. So, you were also probably going to have to get somebody that really was willing to, take a leap of faith with you and believe that you're going to help build the roster around him, and that he was going to be given the space to do the things, deal with probably some ups and downs at some points because of where the roster is right now. And obviously it's their first go at it.
You know what you needed? You needed a dog. You needed a dog.
Yeah.
And Daronte Jones, he's from PG County.
Yeah.
It's very nice to say he was born in suburban Washington, D.C. Let's put respect on it. Let's put respect on it. He's from PG County. He's coming home. He's coming home. Like, I like the fact that there's a coach that's willing to say, hey, I know y'all may not have all the right pieces, but on the flip side, if somebody's like, I can only operate if I have a Ferrari. Like, come on now. Sure. It ain't even like that. Sometimes you got to get it out the mud. And for my estimation, he's gonna have that. He's gonna have that dog in him. He's got that swag in him. Every image that you see, and even when you hear him talking to the players at the Senior Bowl, like, he's gonna be able to impart a level of intensity to that defense. He's gonna be able to bring their level of play up. Hell, I don't want to go no further. We'll say that for another episode. We'll say for another episode that you need a dog. That's what
they're going to get a dog at 7 too. I think we agree in that first round. If they stick at 7 and if they take, some draft capital move back, there's some dogs on defense in this draft that could really help this team, especially in that first round, that first 10. So excited about that. So Daronte Jones is the guy. That'll do it for this episode. We'll get back to you again once we obviously hear from Daronte Jones and David Blau. Finally, they're going to finally have press conferences coming up here soon with both the new coordinators. So we'll be interested to hear what they have to say, kind of get a little lean maybe on how they're going to play on those sides of the ball. For Anthony Armstrong, Scott Jackson, Believe in Commanders podcast brought to you by FanDuel and part of the Believe Network. Please like, follow, and subscribe. Until next time.